the best thing about this is the feedback that we've received from our partners has been brilliant. The perception change of FreeAgent that we've made through a strategic investment into practices is really reflecting itself both in the sentiment that we hear, but also the market growth that we've had as a company.
Tony here, the Senior Digital Enablement Manager at FreeAgent, and I'm here with Stu today, and we're going to be talking about CIS at FreeAgent.
Hi, I'm Stu, and I look after tax engineering here at FreeAgent and all things CIS.
So, CIS and FreeAgent, we made some changes recently, mate. Do you want to give us the overview of the changes, then we'll dive into the problems underneath them?
Yeah, absolutely. So FreeAgent's been great for CIS subcontractors for quite a long time, but we made the decision recently to support the contractor side, which is something that we've heard from so many of our partners, especially the problems with handling the bookkeeping, the record chasing, all the things that come with dealing with construction clients. And so we spent a lot of time on the contractor side, and we've built out the CIS 300 that you can now review and prepare in FreeAgent, and the ability to really automate a lot of those ledgers to take the pain away from the practices that handle contractors, really.
Cool. So if we wind back, so we think 5 years ago, we're looking at the shifts in FreeAgent and how we've evolved as a product. So I think it was probably fair to say that we were quite focused on the business in those days, whereas actually over the last 5 years or so, we've really kind of like channeled into the supporting our accountants and our bookkeepers and helping them to tackle stuff like CIS, right?
Absolutely. We've actually doubled the amount of product and engineering input into things being built for our practice partners. You're absolutely right. For the first 10, 15 years, we were built for that small business owner. But that quite radical shift is one of the major reasons why we've invested in CIS. And the feedback on it has been absolutely terrific. And especially in the MTD world now, where we've truly optimized all those workflows to match exactly what our partners are telling us essentially. So the real world problems of CIS bookkeeping and MTD bookkeeping has allowed us to develop quite a fantastic solution, really.
And when you get into CIS and the contractor, the typical demographic, I think what we heard from our partners was a challenging subset, partly due to the behaviour and not being on site doesn't necessarily lend itself to kind of like doing your books on your phone, that sort of thing, and then also the fiddly nature of having to kind of like deal with a certain transaction pattern.
Yeah.
So like that was the common thing we were seeing with practices, with that type of complaint, that sort of double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly that. So when we were working with our practice to develop this, what we were hearing time and time again is when you do anything with CIS and an accounting software, you need to make it as flexible as possible because mistakes will happen. So, for example, when you create your CIS invoices or bills, depending on the subcontractor or contractor relationship, we allow you to change them very easily rather than having to go through a lot of hoops to make those amendments. And one really strong example is you can explain any CIS income directly from the bank statement as a subcontractor, and we will automatically gross that up amount for you for the CIS, whether it's 20% or 30% or gross, so that you don't have to work that out for yourselves. So it's again those real world pain points that make FreeAgent's solution really market leading in that regard.
But that was new, right? So originally we stuck on the invoice side when we were looking at the subcontractor side, but now in listening to that, that approach from practices of like, oh, actually, John, we just want to do it through the bank, then we've made those changes, right?
Yeah, absolutely that. And it's the same now flowing into MTD as well. We have built the ability into MTD for you to get back all your CIS records from HMRC into FreeAgent. So you don't have to wait for the payment and deduction statements to come through or the 19th of the month and chase the contractors for the payment. We can now pull all that back into FreeAgent from HMRC and reflect that within MTD. And again, it's just another example of making it real, like taking away the real pain points that practices were seeing. And if you dovetail that into a lot more investment in our practice dashboard product that gives far more power and visibility over all your clients in one place, and you can review them in that single area with a lot of power tools like Find and Fix. Find and Fix allows for the bulk change of items in a client account in one go. Is just making the overall end-to-end solution really powerful.
So for the construction client that maybe had put everything to sales and not put any VAT on everything, or maybe they just put all of their expenses to entertaining instead of cost of materials or something like that, yeah.
Or they explained all transactions and then you explain the reverse charge to them for the 10th time and they're not really quite sure what that still is, so you can make that change in bulk.
And maybe they, despite you putting them onto an app to collect their data, they still came in with their bag of receipts.
Absolutely that.
Crack plaster off a couple of those receipts in order to process those receipts. So if you have felt that, you're probably not alone as a practice, right?
Absolutely not. And I think the best thing about this is the feedback that we've received from our partners has been brilliant. As in, the perception change of FreeAgent that we've made through a strategic investment into practices in the last couple of years is really reflecting itself both in the sentiment that we hear, but also the market growth that we've had as a company.
Yeah, I think so we operate in a world where accountancy practices are bombarded with technology improvements on a daily, probably sometimes hourly basis with the different tools that they use. So it is really difficult to keep on top of this stuff. What we're trying to do through this series is to help folks to understand the steps forward that we've made, and that what we've tried to do is make those steps forward in areas that they really feel pain in, rather than kind of maybe, adding things that perhaps are nice to have, rather than like the fundamental bricks and mortar of, pun intended, fundamental bricks and mortar of, of day-to-day accounting habits, right? And that's why we try and listen as much as we can and try and build those features into what we're doing, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of what we do that makes FreeAgent really good isn't always suitable to CIS. So I think a good example is we've got a premium mobile app, we've got incredible bank feed coverage, and our bank automated categorization is up 80% from day one. But what we hear from practices is, I can't get my CIS contractor or somebody to connect their bank. They won't use a mobile app. And so we have to invest in the other ways to make it a really positive solution for all of our practice partners. And I think that's where we're getting a lot of the good feedback to us, is the edge cases that FreeAgent wasn't always designed for 10, 15, 20 years ago. We're now doubling down into them to make it suitable for practices of any size with clients from any industry.
And like if we look at the evolution from dealing with subcontractors into dealing with contractors, so what we were hearing was that so you've got building contractors who've always been contractors and they need a pretty sophisticated solution, right? And that's fine, that's always been the case. But you started to hear more and more of this grey area in between, where you had a subcontractor who took on 3 or 4 contracting jobs during the year and they wanted a solution, and we didn't used to offer that, and that kind of helped to feed into the solution that we now provide, where you can look at the subcontractor side and the contractor side as well, right?
Absolutely that. And because we genuinely care about the UK's smallest businesses, our founders were contractors themselves, we don't charge for any extra CIS facility either. And so you can move on that journey with us from being the smallest subcontractor that gets picked up on sites and dropped off and you're not really sure how to handle your bookkeeping, all the way through to a limited company contractor where you're managing multiple subcontractors and payroll and all those kind of things. And that's all included in the FreeAgent price.
And how does that filter into the biggest change to the personal tax landscape in a generation, right? MTD for income tax. Like, how does that play out in that world? Is it a big problem there?
Yeah, I mean, about 30% of the MTD cohort is construction clients. And so as we've developed our MTD solution with our partners, we have made a lot of adjustments to make that flow as easy for them as possible, so that when they're not using the solution at all, or they're using it as little as they want, we're helping our partners with really strong cross-client bulk power features so they can run their practice just as easy as they could as if they were using spreadsheets before, where they know them really well. They can transition onto FreeAgent and have just a perfect experience when they're using us.
I personally love the automation that we have around MTD and the way that you can, using the tools that are available to you, like there's no friction point between getting that client set up on a bank feed and then having their quarterlies done, right through to that same experience at the end of like, oh, we need to, tidy up what's already there, but probably most of it's already done because we've been through that process, and that stuff can be automated to the extent that you want it to be, right?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, we're the only provider on the market that goes to the granularity of practice controls around MTD that we do. So things like, you can say for every quarterly update or the end of year adjustments or the final declaration, do you want to turn on client approvals? Yes or no? And if you do, it goes on the audit trail. If you don't, maybe you're doing them outside. We can also say, do you want to bulk file your quarterly updates for these people in bulk? You just run it once. Or you can even, as you say, opt into automatic filing. So you can say 7 days after the period ends, so you're into your quarterly update period, just file them on that day for me. I don't even need to click a button. And we're really proud of that. And again, the feedback's just been absolutely terrific.
And that is like, as we start to feel the warmth of the MTD fires as we head towards the first quarterly filings, we are now in that place where the reality of that data collection task, if you're not choosing a platform, is really starting to hit home, I think. So, yeah. Anything else that you think is important for our practice partners or future practice partners to know about CIS and FreeAgent? Anything that...
I think just more in general, Tony, we've got our product timeline is live on our website, so you can go to them at any time, or that website any time, and see all the things that are coming soon. And there are very much construction stuff in there, as well as MTD stuff, or if it's limited companies, new developments there. So I'd encourage anyone to go and check out the timeline regularly. We are shipping faster than we've ever have before. We've won multiple awards in the last couple of years for quality and quantity of output. So watch this space.
As always, mate, a pleasure. Thanks ever so much for your insights. If you want to find out anything more about FreeAgent or about CIS, then just jump on the website.